From Wana Brands, welcome to Enhance Your Life. I'm your host, Jonathan Small, and each week I talk to people from all sorts of professions and backgrounds about how cannabis has enhanced their lives and how this healing plant can enrich your life too. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Enhance Your Life podcast, sponsored by Wana Brands. I'm John Small, the host of the podcast, and I have with me a very talented and interesting guest. Probably has the best name of any of the guests I've had on the show. Jeff, the 420 chef, is with us. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be exciting.
Yeah, Jeff is the author of a book called The 420 Gourmet, which is the art of elevated cannabis cuisine. And he is also the creator of Tasteless, which is a CannaButter and Canna Oils line. And he's the inventor of something called Culinary Cannabis, which is cannabis flower that mimics the smell and taste of familiar herbs and spices like oregano, rosemary, thyme, cinnamon. And he has been dubbed the Julia Child of weed by the Daily Beast. I think I wrote an article once and called you the Rachel Ray of reefer. Everybody's always trying to find a name for you. But the point is that you work with cannabis in ways that really no other cannabis chef in the world does. And you have been doing this for a while. So Jeff, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, let's start with a bit of an origin story of how you got into this line of work. You weren't born as Jeff, the 420 chef. So tell us how this all came about.
So, it's interesting. I had been living in New York and I've been in the fashion industry for like 30 years, but I always had a hobby. I love cooking and baking, and I always loved putting cannabis into my food, even since college. It was just one of those things I loved to do. And I did it the same old school way that anybody ever did it. And then about 2010, a family member was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And one of my friend's mothers was diagnosed around the same time with terminal ovarian cancer. And they were going through late stages and just wanted to medicate with cannabis to make, end of life more palatable for themselves. And they were like, maybe you can make us cookies or cakes. And I started with cookies, the old fashioned way, tried and true, used a crock pot to make my CannaButter, made the cookies, and they were potent, but they tasted terrible,
Right.
And they challenged me. They said, look, we don't want to know we're medicating when we're eating. We medicate enough, and the last thing you want to do when you're nauseous and going through the stuff that they're going through, chemo and everything else, is put something into, in your mouth that's going to make you not want to eat, So when you're sick like that, food is strength. So they said, listen, you've got to figure out a way to take out the taste. And if you did that, you could help a lot of people. So it took me about 1.5 years to figure it out. Unfortunately, they never got to try it. But what I was able to do was figure out that there's certain compounds in the plant that are responsible for that weedy odor and taste. And a lot of people think, oh, but I like that weedy odor and taste. But little do they know that weedy odor and taste is nothing more than burnt terpenes, chlorophyll, and flavonoids.
Oh, wow.
So, the same way that you can have, let's say, 3 different types of toast: white bread, pumpernickel, or rye. And you burn that toast, the black part's always going to taste the same, right? It's like burnt toast. The same thing with cannabis. So no matter what strain you use, doesn't matter if you use something like forbidden fruit or tangy, which are very fruity and fragrant, or something more like green crack, which is more herbaceous and grassy. Doesn't matter what strain you use in your food, you're always going to get that really danky, herbaceous taste. That taste is really those burnt compounds that I was just talking about. So I figured out that if you can remove the majority of those compounds before you even start, the medicine in the plant is really housed in these little tiny glands. They look like little glass mushrooms that are called trichomes. The trichomes are what house the THC and CBD and other cannabinoids. Those are hydrophobic. So they also are much less volatile than the terpenes, the chlorophyll, and the flavonoids. So you can remove the 3 compounds responsible for the taste, and at the same time leave in the cellulose of the plant with the trichome. So I figured out a way to do that. There's 2 versions of it. There's one which is based in molecular gastronomy. This goes way further than what I teach people, but ultimately I teach people now how to make a light tasting version of the CannaButter or canna oil by removing the majority of those compounds. And then, on the commercial side of things, we literally have removed all of the compounds that we need to remove while keeping other compounds and the trichomes intact, so we can have a tasteless CannaButter, tasteless canna oil for tasteless edibles, so to speak. And also we can come up with something called Culinary Cannabis, which is what you were talking about, which is the flower. Looks just like, cannabis, although if you put it in a jar that says no oregano on it and you grind it fine, it looks like oregano, but it tastes just like oregano, and it smells like oregano, but it's 100% cannabis.
So interesting. So you became sort of a scientist working in your lab to figure this all out. Did you have a background in science, or was just what was driving this passion to go really deep like that?
I'll tell you, I never had a background in science. I was always interested in science, but for me, science was only what I was interested in. So this is something that I was so interested in that I immersed myself into it. And I spent years researching the plant. Literally, it took me 7 years to get where we are today, where we actually have this culinary cannabis. And we also have something called odorless pre-rolls, which is basically the same sort of process that we're using, taking it a few steps deeper so that you can actually smoke the product. And when you blow out the smoke, there's no cannabis odor, but we can make it taste like clove or mint or whatnot. So you have a really pleasant smoking experience. But when you blow out that smoke, there's no odor, right? So we've been able to remove all those compounds by understanding the compounds. And I took, a lot of time, over the past, 6-7 years to really understand the nuances of the plant, but even more importantly, the nuances of the cannabinoids and the other compounds in the plant to make sure that we're removing the right ones and keeping in the right ones.
Yeah. It sounds like it's hard to do this on your own. It took you 2 years to figure it out, right? So if somebody's just going to make pot brownies or whatever they make at home, infused food, and want it to taste right, it sounds like they need your help or just need to buy your products. But what you mentioned, you teach people. How does that work? Do you teach consumers, or you teach other chefs how to do this, or both?
Well, yeah, so that's kind of a bit of a loaded question. First of all, I've made it easy for anybody to do this, right? So I've got videos online, and in my cookbook, there's a little tutorial. It's super simple. Really, all you need to do just to achieve the point where you're removing the volatile compounds is you need to soak your bud in distilled water for a few days. Just change out the water until it runs clear, which is clean. I always see they do that in a French press because a French press is the perfect strainer for it, right? You just strain it and pour it. It's easy. And then you have to dry and decarb it. Or actually before that, you have to blanch it, which is something that people at the way beginning were just like, I cannot blanch my weed. You're basically boiling it and putting it in ice water. So people are like, you're going to ruin it. But the fact is that those important compounds, the trichomes specifically that I was talking about, they're hydrophobic. They won't wash off, and they are only volatile above certain temperatures, like 365 degrees. So you're boiling water at 212, you're not going to hurt your trichomes on that plant. So it's all part of, it's very, and then you just dry and decarb it in the oven. It's super simple, and you can actually have really great tasting CannaButter and canna oil you make yourself. If you want to learn how to cook with cannabis, we teach online. You can, sign up through our website. I do a lot of virtual classes. We're just now starting in-person classes again, which is really great. I've been vaccinated, and if you've been vaccinated and you feel comfortable, I'll definitely come to your house, and teach you how to do that as well. And of course, I teach chefs. I've been teaching chefs for a long time. And one more thing, a lot of people have an issue with dosing. They don't know how potent their edibles are. So I developed a THC calculator, which is free on iOS and Android. Anybody can download it. And all you have to know is the potency of your flower when you first start, how much butter or oil you're using, and what you're using it in. Put in the numbers, and it will tell you how potent your CannaButter or canna oil is, and then how potent your each individual serving of your recipe is. How
do you measure potency? Like what do you say? Like, this is very potent, or what is it? Or are you saying, oh, this is going to have 4 milligrams of THC in it? Or tell us how one knows what potency is.
That's a great question. Basically, it's based on the amount of THC. Or if you're using hemp, CBD, we have the same exact product for hemp that we do for cannabis. If you know your percentage of starting THC and you follow my process, right, or any process really to make CannaButter or canna oil, then you'll get a number for how many milligrams of THC are in your end product. Let's say that you've got, just using our calculator, your end result is 10 milligrams of THC per teaspoon of butter. Okay. So now you say, okay, well, I want to put 10 milligrams of THC into my pancakes. I want to do, let's say, whipped butter, right? Super simple. Whip your butter, add in the CannaButter, whip it up. Now you've got 10 milligrams of of CannaButter in your whipped butter. You put it on your pancakes. Now you're ingesting 10 milligrams. The thing that people need to understand, though, is that 10 milligrams is a lot.
That is a lot.
For most people, they're good with 2.5 to 5 milligrams. People who are more, used to consuming cannabis, 10 milligrams is a good number. And then there are decadosers that need 40, 50, 100, 200, 300 milligrams. So our bodies are all very different. Our tolerance levels are different, and one of the things that chefs have to do is we have to assess the people that we're serving and make sure each person gets what they need.
And when people are cooking, what do you advise them to do to make sure they get the dosage right? Because I can imagine this is a big issue. This is a big issue in general with edibles, is that everybody's had that experience. Well, not everybody, but many people have had a negative experience with edibles where they just ingested too much THC and then they got higher than they wanted to get, and sometimes freaked them out. So what do you advise people in terms of when they're cooking with THC to make sure that they're hitting the proper dose?
So I always tell people to start low, right? We say in the industry, go low and go slow.
Go slow,
right?
Yep.
What that means is start with a smaller amount of THC and see how it makes you feel. The challenge is that it usually takes about 2 to 2.5 hours for people to feel the effects of the THC. So they're like, oh, after half an hour, I don't feel it. I'm going to have more. Right. And all of a sudden they overdo it, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So you have to make sure that, number one, you are only having the maximum amount within a specific period of time. So if you're going to go up to, let's say, 5 milligrams, you can keep going until you have your 5 milligrams within 2 hours. Now, there are also new products out in the market. Like, for example, our Culinary Cannabis is one of them and have a quick onset, right? One of the things that, we do at our dinner parties is we serve, for example, a canopy at the beginning of the meal. Let's say it's a little tiny pizzette, like a little pizza with our little bit of our no oregano on it, 2.5 milligrams. See how people feel. Half an hour in, they're like, oh, I'm starting to feel something. This is good. Now it helps them to titrate a little bit easier as they go through the meal. Because if they're already feeling something, they'd be like, I don't know that I want to go much higher, or I need a lot more, right? And we can start titrating them that way. So if you're going to, for example, a dinner party and the chef is going to serve you either a quick onset beverage or a quick onset appetizer like we do as well, then it's a lot easier for you to dose. If you're doing it yourself, you have to make sure that you understand how much cannabis or THC is in each serving of what you have. And then you have to only max out up to 2 hours with the amount that you want to dose throughout the meal. So if you want 10 milligrams, do not go past 10 milligrams in those first 2 hours.
Start low, go slow. It is the mantra of this podcast, and really should be the mantra of all cannabis consumers. Jeff, the 420 Chef as a name. How did you come up with that?
It's interesting. You're one of the first people to ask that question, but it's an amazing story. When I first started doing this, I was going to get the name the 420 Chef. So I was going to, I went on to GoDaddy and I searched the 420 Chef and it was available. But I wasn't sure of myself. And I'm like, who's going to do this? This is crazy. I'm not going to buy it. Let me think about it, right? For 2 weeks, I think about it. One night I wake up, it's 3:30 in the morning, and I'm literally like in a panic. There's this voice pounding in my head saying, get the 420 Chef, get the 420 Chef, get the 420 Chef now. So I literally wake up 3:30 in the morning in New York City, okay? And New York City is a big part of why I'm saying it, because there's a reason for it. And I go to my computer, I go to GoDaddy, I type in the 420 Chef, and it's taken. I'm like, oh my God. In 2 weeks, who took this name? And I type in, there's a thing called Who Is. I go to Who Is, and that same exact night in California at midnight, which would have been 3 o'clock in the morning in New York, a company called Marijuana Inc. bought the 420 Chef.
That's so
interesting. I'm like, oh my God.
You put it out there in the universe and it went, yeah.
And the universe is telling me to get it. And it's waking me up, and I don't wake up until it's too late. And then I go, oh my God, I totally messed up. What am I supposed to do? And the next thing I thought in my head was, just do Jeff the 420 Chef. I just typed in Jeff the 420 Chef, got it right away, and that was it.
That's so cool. Now, when did you first discover cannabis in your own life? Have you been a consumer of cannabis most of your life?
Yeah, I think I was like 14 or 16.
Okay. Do you remember your first time?
Oh, I do remember. Yeah, yeah. I'm going to say it was maybe even 15. So we went on a retreat, a seminar, and me and my friends went out into the woods, and a friend of mine had something. He goes, let's try it. And we lit one up, and, we were sitting on a log, and we were just having the best time ever. And I was like, oh my God, I love this stuff. We all did. I mean, it was just, that was back. I'm going to date myself now, but we're talking, let's see, 19, geez. So like I'm saying 1970, mid 1970s.
Okay. That was when people
crazy.
were, yeah. Well, that was when people were smoking weed, pretty regularly. And, I mean, they always are, but so you liked it because a lot of people their first time don't like it, but you found it to be good from the first time.
Oh yeah. I loved it. Yeah. I think it's also because it's how you do it and who you're with. If you're with a good group of people and, you're all having a good time and you're just like laughing and, sharing stories and, staying out like for hours, just, shooting the shit and, just enjoying nature. There's nothing better when you're like 15, 16 years old,
And how do you use it now? Do you use it when you're cooking? I mean, you do use it when you're cooking because you use it in your cooking, but do you use it as being a chef? Do you find it helps you focus? Or is there a different time for you to get high and use cannabis as opposed to?
So when I'm prepping, I'll be high.
Mm-hmm.
I love smoking before I prep. Helps me just focus and I can really like get to the nitty gritty. When I'm cooking specifically at dinner parties and stuff, I'm not high.
Interesting.
I need to be, 100% on point, make sure that I take care of each individual person who's there. And it literally is a personality shift for me because when I am high, I'm just like zoned in on what I'm doing. I'm chopping just the right amount. Everything is sized just right. It's, there's a thought process that goes into prepping when you're cooking. But when it comes to the actual dinner party and I've got to be there and I've got not only be cooking, but watching a staff and also watching my guests and making sure that everything is okay. I've got to make sure that I don't miss a thing. When I'm high, I can sort of be like, all right, everything's cool. When I'm not high, I'm a little more rigid, Yeah. And I kind of need to be that way when I'm working.
So you've tried cannabis in all sorts of foods. Is there any kind of food that where cannabis you just don't find mix? Like, I've heard when people are creating edibles, there are certain flavor profiles that don't really work with cannabis. And I'm wondering if that's true in the kind of cooking you do too. Like it's just this is not a good fit for whatever reason.
Not at all, because we remove the taste.
Right. So it doesn't matter.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I can cook anything, even with sugar. I mean, there's now infused sugars. There's a company called Sugies out there that has a sugar that's better than my own sugar that I make. I used to make my own infused sugar, but they figured out a way to make sugar taste just like sugar that's infused.
Yeah, once you take the taste out, you're good to go in any way. Before COVID happened and the pandemic and the shutdown, LA started to open some restaurants that were serving, well, they weren't really serving cannabis infused food yet, but they were serving cannabis alongside food. I'm thinking of the Cannabis Cafe. We both live in West Hollywood area. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you see in your future, like opening up a restaurant one of these days? Because you're such a...
So funny you ask. So actually, is West Hollywood gave licenses to 8 different companies to do that. I have one of the companies I was involved when got the license. We were supposed to open up our restaurant/lounge with actually food that would be infused with our culinary cannabis by the guest, which I'll explain in a second. We're supposed to open around the last April 20th. We were told to stop in March. A lot of things happened between the time the COVID was announced and now. I don't know that my restaurant/lounge is actually going to open the way that we were going to. There's a lot that's going on that I can't really talk about. But what I can say is that my goal now, and I've pivoted a lot, is I know so many chefs. I've got a list of over 50 chefs. And I'm not just talking about, chefs that are just, cooks that want to be chefs. These are real chefs that, are not only working in great restaurants, some of them are actually working in Michelin restaurants, and they either want to cook with cannabis. Some of them are great cannabis chefs. So I've got a list of cannabis chefs and chefs that want to cook with cannabis. And what my goal now, I think, is going to be is, as these restaurants open up, even if mine opens or doesn't open, I'm going to be bringing and curating all these chefs from all over to come in and do pop-ups at all these different restaurants. So, if the restaurants and lounges don't have a chef on staff, that's going to be there, all the time, which it looks like many of them won't, but they're going to have the kitchen and then they're going to have the access. Then we start bringing the chefs in from everywhere and say, okay, tonight featuring Bobby Flay cooking with 420. I don't know if that's going to happen. It'd be wonderful to be, to have that happen. But again, it's like any chef that wants to cook with cannabis, I'll be able to bring them into the West Hollywood cannabis scene. Now, Los Angeles has not done that yet. Just West Hollywood.
Just West Hollywood. Yeah. West Hollywood seems to be, for those who don't know the way it works, West Hollywood has its own government, its own police force. It's like its own little world within the Los Angeles County.
One other thing I'll just say about that as well is that any of the restaurants and lounges cannot serve infused food. So the food has to be food that's non-infused, but can then be infused by the consumer. So until Culinary Cannabis came on the scene, we were just saying, okay, well, we'll drizzle some oil on a salad, some canna oil, or we'll throw a piece of infused chocolate into a fondue. Now we can make, for example, pizza and sprinkle our no oregano on it, and you get high from eating pizza with no oregano.
That's interesting. But you have to give it to the consumer. The diner has to add it themselves, that you can't add it in the kitchen.
Correct. It has to be in precisely dosed packages as well.
Oh, wow. Do you think that'll ever change?
I think after 2 years, they might want to take a look at it again. I think they want to see how people trust the system. Having chefs do it for an entire restaurant on a continuous basis is arduous at best. So it's really, and people don't know what they're getting, and, none of us need problems. So I do understand where they're coming from. Right. I think there's going to have to be a way to do it that's going to make it easier for everybody.
Right. There's still a part of me though that thinks it's such a double standard because you don't put a limit on the amount of alcohol you can serve, and that makes you feel that can make you. It's almost worse. At least cannabis is good for you. All right, Jeff. If people want to find more about your courses, about your products, where should they go?
Super simple. Just type in Jeff the 420 Chef. We have jeff420chef.com. There's a
That's because you bought that URL. We know why now.
There's Jeff the 420 Chef on Instagram. You can reach me, Jeff at Jeff the 420 Chef at jeff420chef.com. We have a Twitter account. We have everything out there. So, it's not hard to get in touch with me.
You would have to have a really high dose pancake to not be able to find Jeff the Chef.
Also, our THC calculator is available on Android and iOS. Super simple. Just type in THC calculator. And we got that one as well, which is great. Our cookbook, the 420 Gourmet, is on Amazon. So, one of the best-selling cannabis cookbooks out there. We sold like 20,000 copies already, which is pretty great. It's also the only cannabis cookbook that shows you each recipe and how many milligrams per serving are in each recipe you make.
Well, you are such an amazing resource, and always enjoy talking to you. And I'm really excited when the world opens back up to partake in one of your incredible meals.
I would love that. That'd be great.
Jeff, the 420 Chef, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Enhance Your Life is brought to you by Wana, the #1 infused product in the U.S. Wana's entire process is designed to deliver the same great experience time after time. They have spent years fine-tuning their recipes so that their products are delicious, consistent, and potent. For more information, check out wanawellness.com. That's Wana, W-A-N-A, wellness.com.